John Noonan, cleanse to survive. I am John Noonan, a performance coach, and I use Buff skincare.
So you're currently F1 performance coach. You've been a performance coach in over 15 different sports.
Yep.
So, name a few: Winter Olympics, Premier League, Everton.
Yes.
Can we say that?
Are you a red?
I'm a red.
Okay.
Not Liverpool. Not Liverpool. Rugby union, tour golf. Have I missed any?
Rugby league, and then a bunch of individual sports along the way, yeah.
With regards to it being such a roller coaster, how is it, or where do you come in to actually help athletes really extract the best out of what they can do?
Yeah, good question. I mean, the wonderful thing about the work that we do as a group is that you are one piece of a giant cog, really, that's trying to optimise and get the most out of, ironically, one person, this messy human, or as we all are, in a seat, trying to maximise the most out of a car that's worth over $1 million. So it's quite an interesting place to be in, and you recognise quite quickly that your biggest contribution is to trying to enable best performance most consistently. And then effectively you start to ask questions about how do you do that? What are the standards that we have to hit on and off the track? And how do we all serve a purpose with contributing to that? So from a driver point of view, or from a human point of view, you're looking at all the key sort of facets that go into high-end performance. So physically, are we fit enough? Mentally, are we where we need to be? How are we coping with the rigors of underperformance or overdriving or setbacks that they might experience? Nutritionally, where are we? Are we well fed? Are we well recovered? Are we fueling adequately in and around our sessions? Sleep. Are we investing enough in that area where we arrive in our best self physically? And then other things like medically, biomechanically, are we moving well? Can we carry some of the challenges that come with staying in a seat in this kind of stiffened honeycomb shell and spending hours and hours and hours a year in that position, which isn't that kind to things like spines and joints? So you recognise that each piece has a very valid and contributing factor, and at any one time the driver needs to have the ability independently to flex and move in every single one of those areas. So for me, my role is to, yes, be a coach, but also be a trusted confidant, sometimes a friend, and an enabler of all of those things, so we can extract the most in every single area consistently to achieve best performance on track. I think the best way to do that is that you try to make the high-end performers, and this is the same whether we're talking about anyone in F1 or in golf or in football, you have to make the process quite autonomous. You want to make them very independent, very skilled, effective learners and thinkers, so that they can do that on their own in the moment when the scenario is there. Yes, the engineer, for example, in F1 has a voice into their ear, but it's the driver that's regulating mental state. It's the driver that's making key decisions. They're just used as a confidant to provide feedback to and from the line. So you recognise the importance of making them phenomenally good independent thinkers and learners.
Do athletes have that? Are they just completely driven in the sense of, no, I'm the best, no one can beat me, or do you think athletes do have to some degree, definitely some element of self-doubt there?
I think what I find fascinating about some of these high-end performers, especially in, let's say, F1 and other, type 1 performance circles, where you see people who are huge personalities, bold, ambitious, massive drive. They are wired that way, undoubtedly. And they fall out of bed with a level of confidence that I frankly don't have. I definitely, when I started to understand self a bit more, would be a little bit more on the prudent side of things. I would often want to weigh up the risks, the costs, before I would step into something, because I didn't want things not to go well. But undoubtedly, you procrastinate. You could quite quickly look at this as that's a threat rather than opportunity, and you can get into states of anxiety and overwhelm as a cost. Say more ideal type 1 athletes who are a little bit more self-determined, huge confidence, they will often just lean into that threat, and they don't see it as a risk. They just see it as an out-and-out opportunity, or they at least explore the costs and the threats of that less. Their mind just doesn't go there, first of all. They go straight into high confidence, high drive. They start to think about areas of their life where they are already very good in terms of ability and skills. So last time I did this, how did it go? Last year, these are my results. That reinforces, that data reinforces this working thesis that I have about myself. And they step into it and they go. And actually, probably for a sport that is so ruthless in terms of session by session judging whether or not you're good enough to be in that position, you have to be pretty resilient mentally straight away to deal with some of the internal narrative that might follow with, oh God, my teammates beat me again. That's not great. Look what happened last session. Look what happened last weekend. And if you get into that state of mind, it can perpetually start to snowball and you can be, in a more negative state of mind. So undoubtedly, some of these guys are there for a reason because they naturally have a predisposition that is high resilience, nitty gritty, and they just lean into pressure.
Crazy. Is there anything that you do or that you do in particular to, as far as habits or routine, that you think really, really helps to minimise that level of stress, or how that comes across to you?
I think it's a phenomenal question actually, because when you start to spend a lot of intense time with somebody and you see the emotions that they go through and the pressures and how they show up and how they experience those pressures, you very quickly figure out how you feel as someone that's supporting them in that situation, but also where are you? Are you able enough to support them with what they need at that time? And undoubtedly, if you're working intensively with somebody who maybe is having a difficult time or they're stressed, they need to feel that you're stable and you're solid and you've got your house in order. And I don't mind admitting that it's taken me a long time. Earlier in my career, I probably wasn't as effective as I am now about mentally being more able and more effective to support somebody and aid someone when they're having a difficult time. But really, if you strip all that back, it comes back to having a really good handle, a really clear understanding about who you are as a person. So once you've got that understanding of self and how you show up when you feel emotional, or where your mind goes when you start to feel stressed, if you have good awareness around that, you can start to more mindfully and consciously put down, okay, behaviourally, this is how I'm going to show up even if I feel really stressed. Or this is what I know I need to think about more often when I feel a little bit under pressure. So you can be that much more effective. So that is definitely it's a learned process. It's a learned trait, if you will. And I've worked with some phenomenal performance psychologists who do force you to be a little bit introspective sometimes about where you go, especially when the buck stops with you and you've got to have a difficult conversation with somebody, or you've got to support somebody and it's a challenging moment. So probably through doing the reps, you get that little bit better. But in the very sense that if that's what I have to do with myself, that's exactly what I try to do with my athletes and or business leaders that I work with. There's a process where you go from, okay, this happened, so if we can take some time and distance away from the event. It's very difficult to go through kind of reflective practice in the moment when you're in the pressure cooker, because you're intuitive, you're instinctive, you're emotionally charged. In a setting like F1, for example, state anxiety is very, very high. You feel in the pressure. It's difficult to step into a more ideal state of mind if you're not used to doing that. But after the session is done, you can then take some time, let's say the Monday after a weekend, and go, okay, we've slept on it, emotions are now settled, you're not in the same state. Okay, what was good about what we did and what you want to replicate again? What could have gone better that we need to think about doing a bit differently next time? And that's that level of introspection that you can start to have. And in essence, what you then want to do is go into a series of conversations where you start to raise a sense of awareness of when we're in that situation again, recognize that this is how you're going to feel, but you've got an opportunity there to respond and not react. A reacting state looks like someone that might be quite emotionally charged, not very thoughtful or mindful or rational. We've all been like, you think about you're driving in a car and somebody cuts you up. You can quite quickly, and sometimes we all have, gone into that road rage. It might be your fault or someone else's, but there's a reaction to that. And usually what happens afterwards, you don't feel great. You feel a little bit charged up. And maybe say you're going into a really important meeting, or you're going to meet somebody, or you've got your children with you. How you show up in those moments are quite defining as well, and they can be quite damaging in terms of perceptions that people will carry. So if you can recognize that and you go, actually, that doesn't really align with who I want to be in those moments, you can then start to overlay more ideal impressions of this is how I want to show up because I feel this is important to me. This is my ideal, but actually I show up like this. And then only through that kind of space and time away from the event after it's happened can you go, well, you said you wanted to show up like this, but you really did this. Do you recognise the traits that are happening that pull you here? What we have to do is push these conscious buttons that pull you from there to there, so you can behave more in alignment with your true self. So you can have things like high self-efficacy, high motivation, high self-worth, and you feel much better for that experience because you're in control. So that is definitely a learned pathway that you go through. And then once you have that reflection moment, you have a self-awareness that's increased, you can then go into acting with alignment. So more consciously you start to overplay, well, these are my principles, or these are the things that I stand for. Habits you mentioned. These are the more ideal things that if I do those more often, I tend to achieve the outcome that I want, rather than I just get something and that didn't feel great.
If you're having 4 flights a week, you're working away, you're coming back, you want to spend time with your wife, you want to spend time with the kids, how is it that you find that balance?
100% fundamental to being able to show up and be the person that I want to be. And we've all got our priorities in life, and a huge one of those for me, my main priority is wife and children. And for me to, on Monday morning getting back from a night flight, to be mentally coherent, present, a father who's able to be giving energy to the kids and be on hand, or do the things that we all consider to be mundane sometimes with kids. They still need that energy. They need to feel that I'm there. So rather than coming in the door and going, I just need to chill out, put your feet up, when that's not an option really, it's right, I need to be on hand. I want to be the guy who's putting energy back into the household. I want to be a fountain and not a drain for my wife, because she's been tired and looking after the children as well. You find a level that you didn't know was there, undoubtedly, and so you adapt to it over time. It's all circumstantial, but coming back to what's important about the routine is, for me, and this has been said quite a bit, but it's the world-class basics. So if I defined, right, physical success for me looks like someone that is fit enough, strong enough, in shape, has great mobility, great health, and if I have this more often, I'm more than likely to be healthier into my senior years. And that for me has been a huge driver physically. Before, there's probably some vanity under there. There was a little bit in sports, and I still to this point do martial arts. So you get found out quite quickly if you're on the mat, so you're not capable to be physically able. But what does that look like? What are the tactics that go into doing that and delivering that as an outcome? So I want to be able to go in the gym or do conditioning anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week. 5 times a week is difficult when you're on the road a lot, but that's for me a target. And I'm probably quite kind to myself if I don't achieve the target, but at least it's a marker of, if I do that more often, I'm probably going to get somewhere near where I want to be. From a emotional point of view, you mentioned it a couple of times, when I feel stressed or overwhelmed, which you can definitely in this sort of lifestyle, I know that's a signal from my body and my mind to me to say, you haven't probably invested enough in some of the physical things, or you've traveled a lot lately, or you're feeling stressed because something's going on that you feel is a little bit in a misalignment with how you feel you should be showing up. What do you need to do about that? And undoubtedly, if you go back to a few things, I need to probably be looking after sleep a little bit more. I need to be thinking about, you mentioned it, nutrition and hydration a little bit. And I also want to be thinking about breath a little bit as well. And there's some good evidence that, when we are stressed or anxious, that our breathing and our regulation in that area starts to change. And you also mentally start to step into a place of what's considered fight and flight. So you're more stressed, you're more emotional, you've got a little bit less control of the situation, and you feel like you're just surviving and not thriving. I know at that point I need to down-regulate a little bit my system without trying to sound too complex, but it's go from 10 breathing rate down, bring down the level of thinking and the noise that's there, and just get a moment for, are you present enough for how you need to be in this situation? And usually the kids have a really, really good way of keeping you grounded, right? Because they'll say, put your phone down, or where are you? You're not listening to me, Daddy. No, and then you're forced to sort of go back to, okay, yeah, I need to just be a bit more present. But I found, especially with training people as well, if you want to get someone in a position where they're, say, more mobile or they're moving well, you know, people who have bad backs, for example, they're chronically poor breathers. Breathing mechanics are all over the place. Pelvis becomes a bit stiff. They lose mobility options around their spine. Breathing is one of many tools that you can use to get back into a place where you go, if breathing isn't normalized, how can anything else be? And then you do, you know, which is quite popular these days, but some box breathing, which then twinned with some mindfulness, which when, you know, people also combine that with other things like cold plunging these days. Like, it's on trend that we're looking for more of those sort of healthy habitual habits. But for me, they're just the world-class basics that if I do them more often, I'm healthier, I show up alert, I'm a bit more emotionally available for my wife and my children, and I'm feeling like I've got enough creative juices that I can look at problems a bit differently, rather than just be back against the ropes and feeling like I just need to get through this week. From a physical point of view, I'm thinking about either moving things heavy, so that's in the gym, let's say lifting weights, and trying to be strong, and trying to build some structural stability and strength so you feel good. Also thinking about moving slow, so that means you're doing some form of stretching, mobility. Pilates and yoga are great initiatives to do that as well. Moving fast, which means you're going to do some form of conditioning, and that can be whatever mode you like, but as long as you're investing in some kind of cardiovascular efforts where you're going out and running, or you're on a bike, or essentially doing something that you find fun as well. Because what we often know is that people who find these activities fun are more likely to do them more often. So you get more habitual return out of those habits, and you can cumulatively be in a place where, okay, I've done not just a week and fallen off the wagon, but I've done 6 weeks of that thing, and I feel great as a product. Other world-class basics would be mindset. And you are consciously thinking on a daily basis, but at minimum weekly basis, of how you're showing up. Emotionally, where are you? And are you acting in alignment with what you deem to be important for your purpose and self? So if I, for example, decide that, okay, I think I am a compassionate, caring person, high integrity, and emotionally care deeply about the people around me, if I'm not showing up in that way, I need to catch that before it becomes a problem and someone says, hey John, you're a bit different, or you're acting out of character. Is everything okay with you? Because that suggests I'm not in control. And a very simple question to yourself at the end of the day is, how did that meeting or that incident go? Was I in control there? Could I have done that a bit better? And the other things of what I'm putting in my body would be nutritionally and from a hydration point of view, and from a sleep point of view. Am I doing the things that are going to bring me back to basics, are going to help me reset from a difficult day or period of travel, or help me recover from the gym, so that I am well fueled and mentally alert and able to do the things that I need to do?
If you've had a bad night's sleep, how much can that affect performance?
In the same way that people are probably familiar with nutrition, of if you are under fueling after a workout, it delays the ability to come back to being your best level the next day. It's the same for sleep. If you are underslept, and we all have our different beliefs of, I'm a 7-hour person, I'm a 9-hour person, and so forth. If you're not at the minimum achieving that for you, that you know brings you to a level of I'm alert, emotionally in control of where I want to be, and I can do all the things that my life throws at me, you are going to struggle. And some of the challenges that come around with sleep is there's a dogma that people believe, I can be a high performer and still do 5 hours sleep. That might be okay in the short term, but in the long term, a bit like rust on a car, you can't see it, but it starts to wear on you over time. And things like your ability to bounce back from a difficult period at work or a stressful period in your life, you will find that you are less creative in your thinking, more emotionally charged, and struggle to problem solve as effectively as you'd like to do. And that starts to become an habitual cycle that you get stuck in because you believe that I minimum sleep and I can still do all these high-end outputs. You tend to see, certainly there's a lot of evidence that shows that if you are underslept, let's say less than 7 hours a night on average, your speed of cognition changes, your emotional regulation starts to change, your ability to retain information, definitely short-term information, isn't as effective, and your ability to focus changes. So if we're looking at the case of an F1 driver, for example, they need to be coming into a corner at over 200 miles an hour, be able to spot an apex effectively, so have a very quick sense of where their body's in time and space. That starts to get hindered if you are underslept chronically. And then you can imagine if you're making errors corner after corner, how that would start to play from an anxious point of view and a stressful point of view, because lap time suddenly isn't there. It can all be influenced by poor sleep, at least consistently. So one of your world-class basics is, are we sleeping enough to recover, and are we sleeping enough to perform? And if you're not doing enough in that area, you are going to struggle over time. And commonly, so if we are underslept, us as mortals, we'd experience more coughs and colds and things like upper respiratory tract infections. And I've been there where I've gone, I think I can survive on 6 hours sleep and still have this really busy lifestyle. You just get sick more often because your body has less bandwidth to cope with all the stresses that it's throwing at you. So sleep literally is your battery, your lifeline for coping with lots of stress, a busy work-life balance, and being physically, emotionally available for the people that you care about. That is the cornerstone of all of that. So I know, for example, with things like wearables, and I've got a couple of wearables that I use, if I see those numbers go south, I know that I probably can't afford to push really hard in the gym, or I can't afford to do tons of exercise, at least today, because I'm probably not in the right condition to go and do that. And if I'm honest with myself, subjectively, I'll marry that up with a number and go, yeah, I probably do feel a little bit underslept here, or a little bit more tired than usual. And do you know what? I have a bit of a tickle in my throat as well. So you can start to line up these things with, the numbers are black and white there for you. Subjectively, they also kind of encourage you to dip into, okay, so how do you feel and what you're going to do about it?
How do you get yourself prepared to have a good night's sleep to allow you to perform?
So as an example, we'd gone from, prior to the Melbourne Grand Prix, we'd gone from the UK and jumped 11 hours over to Australia. And generally speaking, literature would tell you that you need 1 day to recover from one time zone. So that would be potentially 11 days before you start to perform in the car, which just isn't on paper logistically going to work. We do, if we can in certain scenarios, travel early on location. So we have an opportunity to go through that kind of acute phase of, I don't feel tired at the right times, I'm waking up at the wrong times, and I just don't feel at my best right now. So you can get over that struggle. But it is just one of the costs of doing business. So one, you accept there's a level of imperfection, but two, you definitely, we'll put jet lag plans in place, for example, to cope with these extreme shifts, these extreme time zone shifts. And often we'll have it when we're going to Asia, or we're going to Australia or the US, for example. So we have to, prior to, think about, okay, what time of day do we want to perform at our best, and then build a plan from there backwards. So what's the day of arrival to the day of performance? What do we need to do from a sleep-wake cycle to optimise how we're going to feel come game day? Some obvious things that anybody can do, and starting with kind of the hierarchy of things really, would be exposure to light is your biggest needle mover. So if you want to move your sleeping time forwards, and you know that, let's say, 3 p.m. of an afternoon in the UK is already midnight in Australia or elsewhere, you know that you need to start to delay, you need to start to extend how long you see light for. So we want to do things like putting all the lights on at home. You want to encourage the use of screens. If possible, you want to get outside and see sunlight in daylight. So when we get on location in Melbourne, for example, it's still nighttime in the UK. We need to get outside quickly within the first hour, expose our eyeballs to light, do some kind of physical movement, which also is an indicator to our body that, we're awake and we're moving, and we're starting to have to use physical resources to help this thing. So we would go, down to the beach, or get into the water, go for a coffee, have a walk, suddenly have breakfast, and you're starting to take on a new routine in that new setting. But you're thinking about the minute you board the flight, change your clocks to the current time zone, start to think about anchoring and changing when you don't see light around when you need to be alert on time in the new time zone, eat in accordance with the new time zone, exercise in accordance with the new time zone, and try to adopt a lifestyle that would be aligned to, I'm on new time zone.
You mentioned there about, in a couple of locations anyway, so Singapore, obviously extreme heat and humidity when you're there. When you're dealing with these sorts of things and these sorts of different environments, what kind of impact do you find that does have on the skin?
Undoubtedly, you mentioned, for example, Abu Dhabi, very dry heat. You find that you are taking on more fluid throughout the day, and undoubtedly your skin wears it as well. You see the impact of that over time. I used to use just a general experience of using different moisturisers, and trying to retain some kind of moisture in the skin can often be tricky. You either go, you're applying lots of it because you can't retain moisture, or you use it sparingly because it's quite greasy. And so trying to find the right balance, I think, on your skin is quite important. And undoubtedly for, you know, some of these athletes who are having cameras thrown in their face all the time as well, you want to, if you want to feel your best, you know, you also want to look your best. So what I've actually found traveling on the road and having the cleanser, having the moisturizer, having the oil that I put on my skin of an evening, you already wake up, if you will, with, I just feel better about how I look and how I feel. And then you're allowed to, you know, you can put that aside and crack on with the things that are physically in front of you for the day, because you've got that confidence already in that area about how you look and feel. Undoubtedly, if you're in hot ambient temperatures and you're not using things like moisturizers, and you're not looking after your skincare with, you know, the appropriate UV in your say in your moisturizer or in your lotion that you're going to use, you're going to struggle as well. So, you know, it's funny, I've got a few colleagues and we all use different things, but they're all doing some kind of fashion of, you know, trying to look after their skin. So by the end of the week, you don't look like a red tomato, and or you look healthy enough if a camera's thrown in your face. So yeah, it's quite a common thing that we're thinking about. So I think, look, I've tried different products in the past where skin has felt, regardless of what I did, whether I was exfoliating, cleansing, skin kind of felt quite greasy, especially when you say come out of the shower in the morning and you want to get ready to go out. I found it usually starts the night before if I can get that right. So the cleanser that I've used, especially straight after the shower, has meant that I've just felt I've got really clean, really comfortable skin. And then I'm applying the all-in-one oil followed by the moisturizer. Those three products, the cleanser, the oil and the moisturizer, are the three that I'm using consistently. And I've tended to find that probably less breakouts or, you know, impurities in the skin are happening because of those things. And then in the morning, again after a shower, there's another cleanse, and then there's the vitamin C serum I like to use, and on top of that, then the moisturizer or the all-in-one as well, where you've got the UV protection in the cream as well. So those things consistently mean that I don't have to worry about skin health and skin care. It's become a non-negotiable for me. And, you know, in terms of like habits, I'm someone that I will religiously always brush teeth. So it's easy for me to piggyback following brushing teeth, cleansing, and then putting some moisturizer on before bed. And then that's done and dusted, and I can box that off and feel pretty good about it.